If you want this track, you can have it for free. You can download the sound as an MP3. You can share it with your friends and burn it on a CD. Then put it in the stereo because it's all CC. You can turn up the volume, you can blast it loud. You can let the whole town know you're down with the sound. And when they start to come around and ask you what's there to see, you can tell them they can have it all free. Now if they start to say this
noget fedt over det her?
Det er motorer, der går ned fra op til 1600 heste.
er 1912 km i timen. Og den kan gå op til 50.000 fod eller 15 km højde. 300 meter i sekundet er climb. Så går det stærkt. Utrolig krabbemanøvrer, jeg kan lave. Ruller rundt lige så elegant. Hurtige og krabbedrejer, jeg kan lave. Det ser ud igen. Og så kommer der afterbånder ud. Der trykker 16.860 punds trods i afterbånd langsomt for det flyvning. Og I skal være opmærksom på, at nok lige når han er færdig med det, så dukker han som regel op, og der giver det ekstra god lyd, hvis man godt kan lide afterbønderlyd. Når den stiger lodret op, så stiger den med 60.000 fod i minuttet, der svarer til 18 km per minut. Det vil sige, at i løbet af 1 minut, så når den op til den højde, hvor den skal møde sine fjender.
kommer de ind ude fra vest. Under krigen var i juni 1944, hvor den var med ved invasionen i Normandiet.
hjemvendt
I'm very glad to introduce Louise Haagh. She is a doctor in politics from Oxford and reader at the Department of Politics in the University of York. Her specialty is world poverty, labor studies, and social policy. She is also editor of academic journal Basic Income Studies and elected co-chair of the Executive Committee of Basic Income Earth Network. Welcome, Louise.
Okay, thank you. So, I've had to change my talk around a little bit, listening to everybody yesterday and today, and especially listening to the last panel, I felt compelled really to address some of the points that were just made. Because the main point of my talk today is really about strategy. And it is about how the Nordic model features in the basic income debate, and in turn the basic income debate features in the Nordic model. And what I think this debate today illustrates, and the debate globally illustrates at the moment, is that the time has come to move from an argument that I call basic income or basic income minus, to another debate and discourse, which is basic income and or basic income plus. In other words, for many good reasons, for many years, we have been presenting what, for want of a better term, I have called the adversarial argument for basic income, which is about what a basic income replaces. And because we have focused, for many good reasons, on what a basic income replaces, we have tended somehow to bring the Nordic welfare state within a context in which this has been seen as a problem. Why? Because the Nordic welfare state happens to have more developed, formal social policy spending mechanisms and organized workfare, as well as a more organized formal labor market, in other words, more visible labor, right? So insofar as these are things that we appear to criticize, the Nordic model somehow has come to stand as a problem. And that is the wrong way of thinking about it. It's the wrong way of thinking about the Nordic model, and it's the wrong way of thinking about the relationship between basic income and the welfare state. So I think this is a perfect time and the perfect moment to rethink how we think about presenting our discourse in a more positive way. And indeed, what I want to say is I think there is a natural affinity between the Nordic tradition and the proposal for basic income. And it's that natural affinity that we need to draw on and that we need to explore. So in the three comments just now, there were remnants of some of the problems that I associate with the basic income or basic income minus discourse that I think we need to be wary of. And whilst I will start with the alternative, I commend wholeheartedly the very positive steps taken to promote something that looks, or certainly is, a step towards a basic income. And in particular, I want to commend the way in which the step that is taken focuses on, for me, the most important element of a basic income reform, which is to remove behavior conditionalities. For me, that is the most important step. It is also important to remove means tests and make the basic income truly universal. It's also important to make the basic income at a high and sustainable level. But for me, the most urgent part of that reform is to remove the inhumane nature of behavior controls on the unemployed that shame people when they are down. That is not compatible with the Nordic tradition, in fact, and that is why I said yesterday that I think the best argument or the best question to ask is not why we should have it, but why we don't have it. Because I don't think it is in the tradition, the humanistic tradition of the Nordic welfare model, to treat people badly, to shame people when they are down on their luck. So I commend the alternative for taking that approach, and it has surprised me that they have chosen to focus precisely on that part of the basic income proposal, and I think it's positive. However, what I do worry about, and I worried about it yesterday when I heard it, and I heard it just again, is the idea that we need to do this through a discourse of simplification. I don't think the best strategy vis-à-vis the union movement, vis-à-vis, in fact, what is the best in the legacy of the Nordic model is via the argument of simplification, or at least we should clarify what we mean if we say simplification. And I will explain what I mean in a moment, because that also comes back to what I worry about in relation to the established labour movement. I happen to think that many of the gains that have paved the way for the sorts of conditions in which we can now make the argument for universal basic income credibly in the Nordic states are gains that have been made by the organised workers' movement. And I do not think that the organised workers' movement is just a bunch of old socialists who have outdated ideas. I do think that many of the things that Finn Sørensen was talking about this morning, and that he felt possibly might be viewed as conflicting with the basic income, the many different forms of democratization of work, and I use now in both senses of work and labor, all right? Arbeit. The democratization of work, in which I include our care services, publicly provided. The fact that in Nordic states, if you look at the international data, household work is shared between men and women to a higher degree than anywhere else where we have measures, right? So the democratization of work at home and in the workplace, these are developments won over many decades in combination between initiatives and fights fought by the organized workers' movement and by the public sector. One I do worry about, whilst I understand it, is the sense now that unions feel that the state has become one of the biggest problems. In other words, insofar as A-kasserne, the unemployment insurance system, has been colonized by the state because in exchange for the subsidies of the state has imposed these behavior controls, have extended those from the lowest level of basic income assistance to that unemployment insurance system that used to be administered in a voluntary way, in an independent way by the workers' movement. And it's absolutely right that the workers' movement should worry about that. But what we shouldn't do, and what has happened, maybe perhaps not so much lately, is we shouldn't say that the basic income replaces the tradition of voluntary social insurance via the unemployment insurance system. We should not say that the basic income simplifies all of the social benefits that otherwise exist, that play an important role in redistributing work and in protecting people, that make the condition of being vulnerable recognized within the formal labor market. All right, so førtidspension, early retirement, puljejobs, skånejob. Perhaps there are some problems with some of these arrangements, sabbaticals and so on. These are all hard-won gains, and they are entirely compatible with the ethos of what we believe is important about basic income. What the basic income will do, or can help do, and this is the reason why it is so utterly compatible with the organized workers' movement's objectives, it will enable individuals to re-democratize the state, to reclaim the control of these resources and ways that they are used, and to reclaim control of the workplace, formal and informal, by giving people the choice and the voice in when to leave a job, when to take a job. And actually something that Finn just said struck me as quite interesting. He said, one of the most important things for the union movement is that employees should not be fearful of losing their jobs, that they should have a voice at work. And by the way, the international indicators of voice at work still place the Nordic countries highest. So the organized workers' movement must have done something right with labor, right? Because control at work is still subjectively measured higher in the Nordic states than anywhere else. Introducing a universal basic income, not just to those who currently receive the lowest level of income benefit, but to everyone. The objective is precisely so that individuals will not be fearful of losing their jobs. It is precisely so that they will have a greater voice in their workplaces. It is precisely an instrument, therefore, to empower unions, to focus on new things, to democratize the workplace, and all these other important issues to do with how to democratize education, how to change the taxation system, how to make a new deal so that we are not thinking about social classes or class oppositions anymore, but that actually the capital-labor relation itself can become democratized, right? So I personally do not see an opposition between the goals of the organized workers' movement, the tradition of the social democratic movement across parties beyond the social democrats in the Nordic states, and the proposal for a universal basic income. And I think it is our responsibility to make a more positive discourse, to make it seen that the universal basic income does not need to be presented as this radical utopian reform. It can be presented like that, and there might be good reason to do that in certain contexts. I know nothing against it. But it's not the only way to present the universal basic income. We can also present it as, in fact, an extension of a very old tradition, a missing piece in that old tradition, and a source of transforming the Nordic welfare state in the current scenario. And so this is my main message today. There are a couple of things. How much time have I got?
8 minutes.
Oh, 8 minutes. Oh,
But if you don't need 8 minutes,
no. I think, how can we create a more positive discourse? So there are some things we should do and that we should not do so much of, I would like to say. I think I've already given an indication that I think we do not need to make the case that basic income is a radical step. I think we can make the case that the basic income is a common sense democratic step, right? Thinking about the proposal again from the alternative, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking it one step at a time, and perhaps there are good reasons, pragmatic reasons, to think first of all about removing behavior conditionalities. But I think there is also a quite simple case to be made for introducing a universal basic income more universally, which we can talk about. But in any case, I think we should start with the basic case that we can all, I think, reasonably agree on, and that is likely to command support wide across the political spectrum and indeed within the population. And that is the case on the basis of A, it is a democratic right, along with the right to healthcare and education. And it is very odd that we don't have it when it comes to the basic means of subsistence, at the very least. We can make it in terms of basic human security, that it does not make any sense to think that people should be motivated to work out of fear, but that they should be motivated to contribute for intrinsic reasons. And that relates to another argument I was going to make, which is that I don't think we should make the work ethic, or indeed the attachment. We talked about that in relation to Arbetslinjen in Sweden. I agree there's many problems, and I don't know Sweden as well as I know Denmark, but obviously there's a problem when the work ethic is attached to paternalist discourse. But I think we don't have to say we don't like the work ethic, as I have seen some of the ways that we are problematizing the opposition to basic income done. We're saying, well, the problem is we need to change this population out there and tell them, stop being attached to the work ethic. And when you understand that what we need is a new society based on a new kind of personality, a new kind of human, then you will be in our group. No, we don't need to do that. There is nothing wrong with the work ethic, all right? I'm sure we all have it. What's wrong is that the work ethic has been attached to behavioral conditions, that the work ethic has been imposed on us on the pain of subsistence. So we should not, I think, talk about the work ethic and people's attachment to it as the problem or as something we want to change. We should simply say, yes, we agree with you, we love it so much. We want it to be voluntary, as indeed you all might agree it already is. So that's one way of turning that discourse around. I think the most important additional argument to make is one about the nature of our institutions. So it's about promoting relational freedom. And in this context, we don't need to see state employees as the enemy. As I said in the discourse yesterday by the union leader who spoke yesterday, it struck me very strongly that how suspicious he was, and indeed rightly, given workfare policies, how suspicious he was of the state. But we need to make a distinction between workfare policies and those people who work in the public sector. And we don't need to demonize all social workers. And indeed, we don't want to demonize all social workers. And I thought it was very interesting to hear about the experiment in was it Aarhus, with giving persons money to see what they would do with it and so on. And one of the comments that was made there was that actually social workers themselves liked this experiment because, as one was quoted as saying, now I see the benefit recipient as my equal. Now I feel that we are citizens talking with each other, right? So again, I think that is exactly the basis, the real basis for saying we don't need to think necessarily in an adversarial way about public services. We don't need to see the state and its functionaries as the enemy, as I think, and I could give you many examples from academic texts on basic income, but I decided I'm not going to bore you with it, but many academic texts, including of our own Danish Hollenberg, had rather a negative view of state employees, indeed of democracy, and indeed of those citizens who chose to labor. And he had a rather positive view of the artist and the free human being and so on. So yeah, it's a rather paternalist attitude towards the working class. And I don't think, whilst there was good reason for that at the time and so on, I don't think we need to do that, and I don't think it serves us well at this particular moment in time. So basic income is about promoting relational freedom and a relation citizen to citizen between people working in different spheres, in different institutions within society. And therefore it's about changing the design, the role of institutions in society. And that to me is more important than the discussion about how do we fund it. Now, of course, that is important. And I agree with all of those who have said, Sørensen in particular, this shouldn't just be funded by the working class. Of course not. We need a much bigger redistributive taxation system and discussion about that, and I've written a lot about that in my work as well. However, that doesn't change the fact that the most important argument from my end is about freedom. It's about relational freedom. It's about the form of institutions. It's about democratizing all institutions, private and public, formal and informal. And basic income is a key instrument in doing that. I want to say a little bit about experiments too, because, 1 minute, the reasons for basic income I have given are the reasons why I agree with Carl and others who have said we don't need a basic income experiment to make the case for a basic income. We should not stake our claim on the results of basic income experiments, none of which, as Guy Standing has also pointed out, in fact are a full basic income anyway. And I think one of the things we should do in Denne is to make a very clear distinction on our web pages and official documents and so on between what a basic income is and what basic income experiments do and represent and can show for us. But my main point really is that we already have a lot of knowledge. If we want to use scientific knowledge about what happens to people in the labor market when they have or don't have security, there's a wealth of it. A chap called Haagh wrote a book for the World Bank called Work Behavior of the World's Poor. And he says he's a sort of neoclassical economist, but he showed that what he found was that when people withdraw their labor from the labor market, they generally have good reason. You know, they'd withdraw their labor because they were overworked, exploited, and could use their time better to rear cattle at home or to look after their children. And he documented that in quite great detail. He also documented that when people overwork and they're unable to make these choices to withdraw their labor, the health of their children and their own health suffered, and therefore their long-term productivity, if you want to weigh it like that, suffered. And more than that, the whole economic development model suffered because it came to rely on low-skill exploitative labor. So we have plenty of evidence why it would be a much better idea to give people basic security that allow them to withdraw and to decide how to spend their time. Another problem with experiments is that they focus on behavior. And what we really should focus on is well-being and motivation. I did some surveys that focused on that instead of behavior, and they showed indeed the sense of motivation and well-being increases when you have multiple sources of economic security. And the main point of that article, as far as this discussion is concerned, is that having security from many sources, and that includes organized employment, incidentally, taken on a voluntary basis, is also a very important source of well-being for people. So, to conclude, the basic income is one element in the democratization of modern institutions and the modern welfare state, and a key one, but very important. Thank you.
Now we're going to hear Christian Engstrôm. He's been a member of the European Parliament between 2009 and 2014 for the Pirate Party, and since then he's got a proposal for a concrete economical model how you can we can implement basic income in Sweden tomorrow.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. I think I can confirm everything that Lena said. When I left the European Parliament, I got interested in basic income, so I decided to see, is it feasible at all to introduce basic income? So I started looking at conditions in Sweden using publicly available statistics. Now, Sweden and indeed the Nordic countries are absolutely fantastic because there are loads and loads of publicly available statistics. I mean, if you're an activist, Google is your friend. You can find out lots of things. So I did that just for fun, and then I published it. I put together a proposal. I published it as a series of 20 blog posts, and this was good because it generated. I posted links in the Swedish Facebook group for basic income as well. So there was quite a lively discussion about it, and I think it got a generally quite positive reception. But okay, it's a draft proposal, something for discussion. Now, the reason I did the Swedish version of it, my idea was to see if it was reasonable enough so that somebody should do a proper analysis of it. And I mean, the government, they have micro-stimulation systems, so you can put in political proposals in it and get very exact numbers on what they would cost. My purpose of publishing these estimates was to see, is it worthwhile asking the computer for a proper answer? And I think the answer to that was yes. Now, that's for the Swedish version. If you read Swedish, you can go to my blog, scroll down a little, and you'll find the proposal, and you can read it. Now, the reason I'm presenting this here in English to an international audience is that I believe that, in particular, the Nordic countries are very, very, very similar. And I would say that most European countries are pretty similar as well. So I'm hoping that if you get interested in this model I'm proposing for Sweden, just have a look at it for yourself, and you can design your own corresponding model for your country rather easily. I mean, just look up the corresponding numbers in public statistics for your country. So that's the sort of basic idea. So, okay, yes, the question is, basic income, is it possible? And the answer, obviously, yes, because we already sort of have basic income in Sweden. Nobody starves to death in Sweden. Very few people sleep outdoors for purely economic reasons. So, I mean, in one way or another, if we're talking real-term resources, we're already allocating whatever is needed to make sure that nobody starves to death, and more or less everybody has a roof over their head. But, I mean, to anybody who loses a job and has to come into contact with the social services, I mean, it's a world that is so very, very different from basic income. The bureaucracy, the degradation, etc. Now, I'm not going to go into details. I mean, many speakers yesterday and today have been talking about exactly the problems. We're all aware of them. I mean, at the bottom we've got social assistance, socialbidrag, socialhjälp, försörjningsstöd, ekonomiskt bistånd. They keep renaming it in Swedish, but I hope you know what I mean anyway. Has a lot of problems, including the fact that it's got a 100% marginal effect. So if you manage to make 1 extra krona, your benefits will be deducted by 1 krona. The unemployment benefits, slightly better, not quite as degrading, but still very, very bad. Lots of, it's a bureaucratic maze. I usually tell people, if you want to learn more about the unemployment benefit system in Sweden, read The Castle by Kafka. It's a perfect explanation on how it works. Again, more or less the same as in every other country. So I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. So the goal, as I see it, is to find a model or a draft model that is, first of all, economically possible, that it's possible to make the plus and the minus sort of add up without doing too fanciful things. I mean, I know there are lots of extremely interesting ideas about how to finance basic income or whatever, really, long term. I mean, finding new tax bases, helicopter money, printing up money, handing it out, could be a possible source. But these are very, very, very big ideas in themselves. I mean, basic income is a very big idea. If you want to add a couple of other equally big or even bigger ideas to the same thing, then you automatically end up with something that is not at all politically possible. And that's the second criterion. I want something that's politically realistic. Now, what does that mean? It means that, for instance, if you put forward a proposal that will drastically lower benefits for families with children, or will drastically raise taxes for middle-income people, you're politically dead. I mean, it ain't going to happen. There may be perfectly good, sensible reasons for doing it, but it's not going to happen. No politician is going to want to pick up your proposal. I mean, we here as activists, that's what we're here for, to put forward proposals that we hope that some politicians will steal and carry on. I mean, I'm a pirate, so sharing is caring. If somebody steals your ideas, that's the very best thing that can happen. But in order for that to happen, it has to be politically realistic. So, okay, the proposal looks like this. 8,333 Swedish kronor. That's roughly about 900 euros per month, tax-free. The reason I choose this exact number is it's 100,000 Swedish kronor a year. But the reason I choose this level of 900 euros per month is it's as close as I could get to the current level of the social assistance. Social assistance consists of two components. One is the general allowance of 400 euros, and then a housing benefit, which depends on which municipality you live in, etc., but around 500 euros. So 900 euros is as close as I could get to the current benefit levels. Now, a lot of people in the discussions on Facebook have argued that this is probably too low, and I would sort of tend to probably agree with them. If it is possible to raise it with say 100 or 200 euros, that would make me much happier. But then I don't really want, there's no point in me promising more money before we made the proper calculation. So let's keep in mind that it's low, but I regard it as livable, but just barely livable. It would be handed out to everybody of working age from 19 to 64. Why do I say 19 and not 18 or 20? Well, it's because in Sweden you leave secondary school, gymnasiet, normally when you're 19. So we want people, and until then your parents have to support you. After that, I mean, if you want to go on to university, my idea is that the basic income should replace student aid, so then it has to be available to people who go straight from secondary school to university. And at the other end, I'm not including pensioners at all. Pensioners already have basic income. I mean, they get income every month. They don't have to do anything at all. That's a very definition of basic income. Many people argue, some people argue that pensions, the lowest pensions in Sweden are too low. Maybe they are. I'm not going to contradict that. But if you want to raise the pensions, we already have the technical mechanism. Then you raise the guarantee pension to whatever level you want. It's fairly expensive because you have to do it for all pensioners, but it's technically extremely easy. So there's no reason to complicate the basic income model with doing things with the pensioners as well. The basic income should cover everybody who's covered by our welfare systems today. It should not be restricted to citizenship. That's very, very important. In Sweden, we have 10 million people living. We've got about 750,000 foreign nationals living in Sweden. The largest individual group is the Finns. There are 60,000 of those. Many of those people have been living and working in Sweden for decades. I mean, it would be totally ridiculous and unreasonable to say that, sorry, we changed the system, you no longer have access to any welfare system in the country where you spent most of your life. That simply wouldn't make any sense at all. In Sweden, in Swedish, there is a word that I really don't like at all. It's medborgarlön, translates literally to citizen's salary. Very bad word for two reasons. First, salary. It shouldn't be a salary. Salary is what you get for doing something. The idea with basic income is the opposite. But the important thing is it contains the word citizen. That leads some people to say that it should only apply to Swedish citizens. But as I said, that would lead to absurd consequences. So I'm very happy if everybody immediately forgets that Swedish word right now. And the final and very important point, if she has no other income, she'll get these 900 euros. When somebody who is on basic income starts getting income from some other source, then the basic income has to be phased out. Now, I know this is controversial, but I think this is probably the most important slide I have here. Very often, many of us present basic income. It's money for everybody. Isn't it fantastic? Well, but it isn't. I mean, I listened to one of Guy Standing's talks on YouTube when he was talking about opponents to basic income and how extremely boring they are, because they will say, oh, they want to give it to everybody, and then they do exactly this back of the envelope calculation. You multiply the size of the population with the proposed level, and then you get to a number that is higher than the state's budget. Now, in different countries, the numbers will be completely different. It's a different currency, different population size in particular, and possibly a different level. But the end result will always be the same. You multiply these numbers together, you end up with something that is bigger than the government's budget. And then opponents can quite rightly say, this is absurd. We don't have to think about it. I don't have to listen to anybody who comes in my door and wants to talk about basic income, because I've done the math on the back of an envelope. I know this is not a real-world idea. So I would hope that we can get away from that. Like I said, for Sweden, if you take the entire population, it's 1,000 billion Swedish kronor to compare with 900 billion for the government budget. If you take only people of working age, there are 5.6 million of those, so that would be 560 million. Okay, it's less than the total government budget, but still completely impossible to fit in. Anyway, so it's negative income tax. That's the model that is realistic and down to earth, etc. So what I'm proposing this to phase out the benefit with 33%, that somebody who is on basic income and starts getting income from other sources should pay normal income tax from the very first krona. That's 33%. But then you would get 33% in your pocket. Which is, well, it's an infinite improvement over the situation today where you get nothing in your pocket if you're on social assistance. So what would this cost? Well, in order to know that, we have to look at the income distribution for Sweden. Publicly available statistics, like I said, I assume it's the same in all Nordic countries. I believe it's the same in most European countries. But anyway, this is what it looks like in Sweden. It's in Swedish kroner. So you see, each bar is 1% of the population in working age. So the top percent, they make 12,000 euros a month. Everybody else makes much less. But we're not very interested in the top percent, we're interested in the bottom percent. So sort of the area to the left where people have no income at all. Now, this is the level I'm suggesting, the 900 euros per month, the yellow area. If we made a system saying that you get 900 euros if you don't make it on your own, but you'll have a 100% marginal effect, then this is what it would look like. And that would cost 102 billion. I mean, with all the numbers in a spreadsheet, it's fairly easy to do the sums to get an estimate. Like I said, proper calculations is my aim, but it's a reasonable estimate anyway. So, okay, this would be much, much better than the current system. We get away from the degradation, we get away from the insecurity, but it will still be a bad system because we still have the 100% marginal effect. No incentive at all to work unless you can get up to a proper and high. So instead we do this. This is what the diagram looks with 67% marginal effect, which means you get to keep at least a third of what you make. Becomes slightly more expensive because, as you see on the yellow, we'll be giving tax deductions to some low-income earners. But the distribution profile is sensible because it really goes to low-income earners. There's a break point. So I'm imagining that everybody who makes up to 2,000 euros a month would get a benefit from this system. They would either get money which they didn't have at all, or they will get tax relief. Everybody over 2,000 euros, over that break point, will pay exactly the same income tax as today. Now, of course, it is possible I have deliberately wanted to not to raise income taxes as part of the financing for two reasons. The first one is, if you raise taxes for the income taxes for the middle class, for the working middle class, you immediately set yourself up for this. Oh, okay, it's us, the hard-working majority, is going to pay for them, the lazy ones. You build that conflict really into your proposal to start with, which I think is politically unwise. And the other reason is, I mean, we envisage a world where it may be that labor working for wage will be reduced. So, I mean, the income tax, long term, it's not necessarily a sustainable tax basis. So I think it's a good idea to get away from that. So, okay. The financing looks like this. Remember, we had 132 billion kroner as a cost for this negative income tax system. How do we pay for that? Well, first of all, it obviously replaces the social assistance, socialbidraget. And the payouts from that system is 11 billion per year in Sweden. It would also more or less automatically replace student aid. The way it works in Sweden, you get student aid when you're studying at university. You get 100,000 kroner a year. So more or less exactly the same level as I'm proposing for the basic income. But of course, with the student aid, 72% of that is a loan. Only 28% is an actual allowance or a gift. So with basic income instead of student aid, it would be a fantastic improvement for all students. They would have as much money while they're studying, but they would have no student loans at all. Now, I should say, this is perhaps a bit too generous. If we want to compensate that, we can easily do it by introducing tuition fees terminsavgifter if you're studying at the university. We can put these at any level we want, so we can balance it so that we get some improvement for the students, but not this enormous improvement. That's one possibility, but I've not included it in my calculation. Then we've got the Public Employment Agency, Arbetsförmedlingen. They cost 64 billion kronor. And that would disappear and be replaced by basic income. And for the final one, to introduce unified VAT. At the moment in Sweden, as in most European countries, we have lower VAT on certain things, in particular food and certain cultural products, but not others. The argument for introducing the lower VAT on food was that it's supposed to help poor families, because it was thought that they spend a larger proportion of their income on food than rich families. This turns out to be completely untrue. The Swedish Parliament has a research service, RUT, Riksdagens utredningstjänst, Parliamentary Research Service. They had a look at this and divided households into four quarters. Both the poorest and the richest and the two in between, they all spend between 15 and 16% of their disposable income on food. With normal VAT, they would all spend between 17 and 18%. So there is no distribution effect at all from the lower VAT. If you want to put it simply, rich people get a discount on fillet steaks and lobsters, poor people get a discount on noodles and pasta, and that's the reason why it happens like that. So, well, here we are. We got 142 billion in financing. We got 132 billion in costs. And we have done no magic at all when it comes to the financing. I'm leaving as they are. The sickness insurance and the disability pensions. At the moment, they're income dependent. So for some people, they are more than the basic income would be. Again, to get something that's politically possible, it would be completely impossible to find any politician who wants to sit on television and explain why he or she wants to take away the benefits from some really, really sick family. I mean, it's impossible to do. So proposals like that simply won't fly. Same thing with child and benefit, child and family benefits. These are so large groups of voters that no politician would dare to touch them. So we're keeping them as they are. So, up. So there we are, a complete full proposal for Sweden, and, as I see it, a basic income designer kit for anybody who lives in any other country. Thank you very much.
Well, first off, a big thank you to Christian, because I now have to revise my whole statement, because basically we work together in this as UBI activists, and we give each other ideas, and we think about these things, and then we arrive at some conclusions. So we share quite some ideas. So I will skip those parts. My name is Martin Jordô. I was, as Lena introduced me, I was recently appointed as economic spokesperson for the Swedish party Feministiskt Initiativ. And thanks for letting me speak here. It's a wonderful opportunity to come to a basic income conference at Folketinget. Today I have quite a cough, so I will try not to cough in the microphone at least. I want to talk to you about why our party is looking at unconditional basic income as a party proposal and where we are in that process. I will not show you sharp numbers and diagrams on a PowerPoint. That is for Christian and other proposal makers. And I can't guarantee that it will be part of the party policy of Feministiskt Initiativ. We are taking that decision in March next year on our Congress. But I wouldn't be standing here as an UBI activist and economic spokesperson if there wasn't a large degree of interest for it, let's say that. So for you that have not been paying attention to Swedish internal politics, let me tell you a bit about the party. It's the world's first major political party that has intersectional feminism as a political ideology. So we try to take that from being a rather academic tool and bring it out into the political sphere to found a whole new movement, much like the Green movement actually did in the 70s and the 80s, and took environmental concern and environmental work into the political mainstream. We're doing fairly well. It was formed in 2005, and we got attention from the media, but didn't really connect with voters at first. But last year, 2 years ago, 2014, when we had the European Parliament elections, we had our big breakthrough in Sweden. We call that the Pink Spring. Now it was quite amazing. It's a young vote, a lot of women, of course, and we really got to feel. I think we went something like plus 1,500% in members in 6 months. So it was like, what happened? We don't know. And we got a spot in the European Parliament, which is now taken up by Soraya Post, who is a Roma activist and has been for a long time advocating for the rights of the Roma people. But we just missed the threshold for the Swedish Parliament, so we're not represented in Parliament in Sweden. We got 3.1%, and the threshold is 4%. So that's for next time. And I like to see us as kind of a sibling to Alternativet and other movements in Europe. We've seen Podemos, we've seen Syriza, we've seen the rise of Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, and something is happening to the leftist movement, a popularization, if you say, something that has to do a lot with the break from the traditional socialism and presenting ideas in a different way, although they are pretty much based on the clear socialist thinking from before, but they use a different language and they connect with voters in a different way. So, just to make that clear, Feministiskt Initiative is very left-wing. We have our closest friend in economic policies is the Left Party in Sweden. They used to call themselves the Communists, but now it's just the Left Party, where our economic policies are very similar. So but we are liberal in terms of citizens' rights and believe in a freedom for each and every individual. So let's get back to unconditional basic income, because that's what we're here to talk about. We had about 20 members that filed a motion for our Congress in 2015 about UBI, most of them from Malmö, actually, just across the strait. And that passed nearly without opposition. It was a very high interest, because this is a young party with a lot of young members, and they knew about basic income. I was a bit surprised. I would think it would be more like the general public, or how it was 5 years ago, that what is that, and that can't be done. But they, nowadays papers are running stories on basic income. It becomes internet memes. A lot of people know about Finland or Switzerland. So they had, in general, a positive view, because in Sweden it's been framed as something that has to do with helping poor people's dignity and helping poor people economically. But they weren't ready to just say, okay, let's do this, because they didn't know exactly what that would mean. So we formed a working group, 8 experts that have been looking at unconditional basic income from our party's ideology for a year. I'm part of that myself. We have 2 professors, we have social workers, we have sharp critics of UBI. So it's been a very wild ride this year, having meetings and collecting all the different stances of what an unconditional basic income really can be. And as you probably know, if we can't agree even in this room, then I would say the movement can't really agree at all. There is not one basic income. There's 100 different basic incomes out there. And as a political party, you have to know what you're talking about. Otherwise, you open yourself to a lot of criticism. So let's go for some of the common feminist arguments for and against basic income, because that has obviously been around. And I would say that, no, generally, let's go back to this young and old. We've been talking a bit about that earlier today. I would say for second wave feminists of like the 70s, getting women out in the workforce and giving them economic freedom through labor has been a key aspect. It's something that's very close to heart. And we have to remember that in some countries, women are still not really represented out in the workforce as they are in the Nordic countries. We've reached that in the 60s, the 70s, 80s through hard work and through the labor unions. They have been super important in breaking that role for women of caring for the home and the family. And that has led to some economic freedom for women, but there still persists a very large gap. In Sweden, the official number right now is that women make 83% of what men make in pay. And that is unacceptable, and we don't really make any gains in that. It's very, very slowly trending towards the positive, but it will take something like 150 years in this pace until we have equal pay. So the old feminists, in my opinion, their mantra is to create equal pay and get everyone out in the workforce. While the younger feminists that might be 20, 25, they're living in the precariat, as Guy Standing has named it. They're seeing the effects right now of, I can get a job that will last for 6 months, then I will be unemployed again. And then I will have hassle with authorities trying to get some money just to survive. Then I can get a new job over there. And they have no sense of job security, and they urgently need a reform for them now. They can't wait 20 years for equal pay, and they generally snore when someone starts talking about full unemployment or that everyone should be guaranteed a full-time job, because they know the realities are not there for them in the market economy as we have built it. So that's a big divide in our party. Generally, the support is much larger for UBI with young people. So a big argument against basic income would be that it would get women to leave the workforce, to stay at home, to choose to care for children, or to do hobbies or something else. And you can look at that in different ways. You can question the moral of it. Is that really a problem? From an individual perspective, if someone chooses of their own free will to do that, is that a problem? Or is that empowering women? Then you can take the society's view of that. Oh, it might not be a good idea. If we're striving for equality in the workplace, then maybe we need more women to work more time. Maybe it's the men that should spend more time with their children to be at home. And our party does have quite a number of proposals to do that. But in the work group, we sort of arrived at, after long decision, that at least in the Nordic countries, we've reached a different level. It's not a big worry that women would leave the workforce en masse. Some could, but not all, because we've reached a cultural stage where working is the norm. It's something that more or less everyone does. Either it's working for pay, or starting companies, or educating yourself, but you're supposed to do something. And we don't think women are willing to give that up just to do care work. And the big argument for is, of course, if you compare to the normal Nordic model, the one that we have in Sweden, Denmark, Norway, is based on employment insurance. You pay your dues, and then when you get sick or you get unemployed, you get an income-based benefit. Normally in Sweden it's 80% of your former pay. Now, if men earn more than women, if women earn 83% of what men earn generally, then of course women will get less social insurance when they are sick, when they are unemployed. And what we see then is that the state actively gives men more money than women. They cement the economic inequalities in society, and they do this based on the notion that this is fair, this is workers' right. You have to pay your way. But in reality, what they do is to widen the income inequality between women and men and make women financially dependent on their partners. This goes through the whole system. When it comes to old age pensions, women in Sweden get 65% of men's pensions as a mean. Nearly all the really low income pensioners in Sweden are women, because they have worked a lot less. And you base the benefits on paid work, and you don't factor in unpaid work. So the biggest argument for us is that through a universal payment, if we move towards basic income, we will in reality give more money to women and to other underprivileged groups in society as well. This argument does not only apply to women, it's equally for immigrants or for disabled or for other groups, that moving towards universal payments creates equality. And that's an argument that is rarely never seen in the public discourse, because we're so busy trying to defend the social insurances. So we don't see universality as a tool for equality. Yeah. So in general, I would like to connect what Louise said before, that our party, when we discuss basic income, we don't see it as an attack on the welfare state or on the Nordic model. It's something that has to be in addition to this, something that has to happen slowly and that have a lot of stakeholders in place. And that's why we will not, and I repeat, a lot of people have asked me about this, but we will not release this is Feministiskt Initiativ's basic income's proposal. This is the number of euros you should get, and you should be taxed at this level, because that is not for us to say. This has virtually 100 different stakeholders that we will have to sit down for a very long process. And we are interested in getting the political system to a place where we move towards a basic income. I think Guy said it before, it's the process, it's not the end goal in itself we want to talk about, it's how we're going to get there. We already have in place a common social insurance, without means testing or degrading controls, and with a common minimum level. I think it's very similar to what Alternativet has in place here in Denmark. And yeah, you can consider that if you're sort of liberal words with a sort of basic income. Personally, I think that's a very important step to take on the road to basic income, because if you take that, then the next logical political struggle will be to expand that to to the general population, not only to the unemployed and the sick. So, moving back, we will submit our analysis to the board. It's an internal document, but it's a pretty hefty one. It's one of the better reviews of UBI I've seen. They will ponder on that, and the Congress will make a decision in March. I would believe that we are in a good place to revitalize the debate in Sweden. Thank you. The Green Party has left basic income. They're not talking about it publicly anymore. And I think we will take up the baton and run with it for the 2018 elections. And then I get to this part where I just yield the floor to Christian, because we basically share the same ideas that we never talk about medborgarlön because it's not based on citizenship. It has in some way to be phased out, either through higher taxes or through a phase out of the basic income, and lots of different things. But that's really the core of it. I encourage you to look up the economic policies of Feministiskt Initiativ, because we're trying to form, not only with basic income, a new approach to economics that focuses on human rights first and GDP and growth secondly. And it's very interesting to be part of that process. Thank you very much.
Finn, hvad er Enhedslistens holdning til UBI?
Som jeg forstår den model, så er det ikke noget, vi kan støtte, fordi den går ud på, at staten skal betale en indkomst til alle, og der er foreslået et sted mellem 18 og 25.000 kroner om måneden. Og vi tror, det vil føre til, at lønningerne de kommer til at falde. Vi vil også opfatte det som, at man griber ind i noget, der er meget vigtigt for den danske samfundsmodel, nemlig det kollektive forhandlingssystem og fagforeningernes rolle som dem, der repræsenterer arbejderne over for arbejdsgiverne. Så vi tror, at det vil sætte nogle meget uheldige mekanismer i gang på det danske arbejdsmarked.
Og du mener ikke, at det at få en ubetinget basisindkomst, det så vil resultere i, at folk i højere grad kan vælge jobs til og fra, og dermed bliver styrket i deres forhandlinger?
Man kunne selvfølgelig godt forestille sig, at det kunne blive konsekvensen. Det tror jeg bare ikke på, for hvis man indfører sådan en model på et kapitalistisk arbejdsmarked, det er det, vi har, hvor arbejderne skal sælge deres arbejdskraft, arbejdsgiveren skal købe den, og den medfører, at lønningerne falder. Og det regner man jo med i den her UBI-model, at de vil falde ret drastisk. Et sted mellem 40-80% vil lønningerne blive sænket med. Ja, så siger det jo sig selv, at det vil der ikke være nogen styrke for arbejderne.
Og der er noget galt i, at lønningerne falder, til trods for, at man får 18-25.000 automatisk, inden man begynder at modtage lønninger.
Ja, fordi et pres på lønningerne, det vil jo smitte af på alle dele af samfundet, og det vil jo... Nu argumentationen er jo, at hvis man sænker lønningerne, så vil Danmark bedre kunne konkurrere med udlandet. Men det er jo kun en stakket frist, for på et eller andet tidspunkt, så vil de andre lande jo tage den konkurrence op og sænke lønningerne i deres lande også. Det er jo faktisk det, vi i høj grad har set i Tyskland, hvor man indførte noget, der lignede den her UBI, nemlig de såkaldte Haagh-reformer. Det førte jo til, at Tyskland blev europamester i at dumpe lønningerne, og det fik til konsekvens, at Tyskland, den tyske industri, eksporterede sin krise til andre europæiske lande. Så vi har ikke brug for, at arbejderne de begynder at konkurrere med hinanden på lønningerne. Vi har brug for solidaritet mellem arbejderne på tværs af landegrænserne, så vi hjælper hinanden med at få de bedst mulige løn- og arbejdsvilkår.
Finn, nu kan vi lige så godt sige til dem, der skulle sidde og se det her, at du repræsenterer Enhedslisten. Jeg repræsenterer Samfundstanken, som har lavet et økonomisk udkast til, hvordan vi får UBI, der hedder UBI Now, og det stillede du dig kritisk for inde i salen. Og der er blevet stillet spørgsmål ind til alle de forskellige modeller, der er af UBI, hvad der virker, hvad der ikke virker. Og så lige pludselig, så blev der kastet med mudder. Kastet med mudder i den forstand, at jeg oplevede, at du kun præsenterede dele af den model, UBI er, og derfor fjernede helhedsbilledet, alt imens du stillede dig kritisk. Og det ærgerede mig, at Folketinget faktisk blev taget med ind blandt den flok enormt kreative mennesker, der sidder og arbejder på det lige nu. Hvad har du at sige til det?
Ja, så må du jo sende den kritik til arrangørerne, der inviterede mig, fordi jeg tror, arrangørerne kender udmærket, eller har en vis fornemmelse af mine holdninger til det her. Og så tænkte jeg er nok blevet inviteret for at fortælle, hvad min holdning er, som et bidrag til diskussionen. Og hvis jeg nu skal spille bolden lidt tilbage til dig, så vil du måske have hørt, at der i andre dele af mit oplæg faktisk var det, man kunne kalde en udstrakt hånd, eller dialog, eller hvad skal jeg kalde det, i forhold til, at Enhedslisten er der åben for, at vi kan lave nogle eksperimenter eller pilotprojekter omkring det her basisindkomst. Så helt så firkantet var det måske.
Jeg er enig, jeg hørte dig sige, at I gerne ville støtte projekter. Det var jeg også meget, meget glad for at høre, fordi jeg mener, det var en frem at finde ud af, om noget virker, eller om det ikke gør, som du selv sagde. Men er det ikke at trække en rød linje op og sige, vi er kamphaner fra start, når du starter med at præsentere dig selv som marxist, og derefter skyder på alt, hvad der har med en markedsøkonomi at gøre?
Jo, det gør marxister jo typisk. Og jeg går altså ind for, at man fægter med åben pande, så vi sagde i Danmark i gamle dage. Jeg tænkte, det var bedst at fortælle folk, hvem jeg er. I stedet for, at de skal sidde og lure på det undervejs i oplægget. Nå, det er nok sådan en skummel marxist, ham der. Så tænker jeg, det kan jeg sgu lige så godt sige fra start af. Så får vi rene linjer, og jeg har altså den opfattelse, efter et langt liv i politik og på arbejdsmarkedet, at basis for et godt kompromis og en god diskussion, det er, at vi ved, hvor vi har hinanden. Det er ikke det samme som, at vi kaster med mudder. Det synes jeg heller ikke, jeg gjorde. Jeg forsøgte at holde mig nuanceret til jeres forslag.
Jeg tror, der er noget håb for, at du vil støtte op om de projekter og forsøg, der bliver lavet på vegne af UBI, i forbindelse med alle de her fantastiske mennesker, der har samlet sig her, for at udvikle sig sammen.
Vi må jo tage stilling til de konkrete forslag og se, hvad vi kan arbejde sammen om. Jeg har jo klart sagt, at ja, vi er villige til at se, om vi kan være med i nogle projekter, forsøg. Og det er vi, fordi jeg tror, at der kan komme det ud af det, at vi kan få demonstreret noget, som jeg tror, vi er enige om, nemlig at mennesker lader sig ikke styre økonomiske incitamenter alene. Mennesker vil gerne bidrage til samfundet. Og som jeg også sagde derinde, hvis det kan bidrage til, at vi får en meget bredere diskussion om, hvad arbejde egentlig er, hvad vil det sige at bidrage til samfundet, og at arbejde ikke kun er lønarbejde, men at du kan bidrage til samfundet på mange andre måder, det tror jeg, vi kan blive enige om. Så kan det bruges til noget konstruktivt, helt sikkert.
Nu hvor man sætter kontanthjælpen ned, at det er også løntrykkeri, og det er jo det modsatte af, hvad du egentlig sagde, når man forhøjer en bundlinje for måske, som borgerløn, ikke? Altså hvis man nu fik en anden, altså så åbenbart for høj en borgerløn man får, eller hvad synes du?
Nej, altså så er du misforstået. Min pointe var i forhold til borgerlønnen og UBI-forslaget. Det er jo, at det ser vi sådan, at der kommer arbejderne til at betale en stor del af deres egen løn via skatbilletten. Det synes vi er en dårlig idé. Men vi er da helt enige i, at der er et kæmpe behov for at få hævet de ydelser, man får, når man er uden for arbejdsmarkedet. Fordi hver eneste gang, man forringer dem, så er det jo også et pres på alle dem, der er i arbejde. I dag er det jo sådan, i kraft af de reformer, der er gennemført her gennem de sidste 5-6 år, at vejen fra en trygt tilværelse med et lille parcelhus og en lille bil, og så til økonomisk ruin, den er blevet uhyggeligt kort. Og det medfører selvfølgelig, at alle dem, der er i arbejde, det bliver jo påvirket af det. Det er der også målinger, der klart viser, at utrygheden vokser blandt de mennesker, der er i arbejde. Og hvem har glæde af det? Det er kun arbejdsgiveren, der har glæde af det.
Kan man ikke finansiere det ved højere skat på store firmaer?
Det må dem, der går ind for sådan en model, jo regne på. Det er vi meget åbne over for. Men hvis man taler om, at alle, uanset om de er rige eller fattige, hvor gamle de er, om de arbejder eller de ikke har, de har en løn eller de ikke har. Hvis man vil argumentere for, at alle individer skal have en indtægt på et sted mellem 18 og 25.000 kroner om måneden udbetalt fra staten, så tror jeg, at man skal have fat i nogle rigtig store og dygtige regnemaskiner for at finde ud af, hvordan det skal finansieres af de 10% rigeste. Det kunne vi jo godt diskutere set fra Enhedslistens side, men så tror jeg, at selv Ubi Naus regnmaskiner, de vil stå og hoppe og danse en hel del og komme ud med nogle tal, der er så astronomiske, så alle vil kunne sige sig selv. Det er der måske ikke så mange politiske realiteter i.
Everywhere we go, we end up